Hello, and welcome to the Shifting Culture podcast, in which we have conversations about the culture we create and the impact we can make. I'm your host, Joshua Johnson. Go to shiftingculturepodcast.com to interact and donate. In this episode, we get to talk with Sarah Bruhl. Sarah is the director of Revive Europe and the evangelism training coordinator for IFES Europe. She's a Brazilian living in Rome, Italy, with her husband and two boys. It was a really good conversation that starts being rooted and grounded in Rome and what does it look like to start a church there as a Brazilian working with Italians. And then we venture on into revival in Europe and the world missions movement and what is exciting and hopeful happening around the world. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation like I did. Sarah is great and wonderful. So let's get to the conversation. All right. Well, Sarah, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to have you here. It's really going to be a pleasure to talk to you today.
Excited to talk with you, Joshua.
Yeah, I know that you came from Brazil to Italy with your husband. So what was that journey like going from Brazil to Italy, and why'd you choose Italy? What happened?
Yeah, it started, I'll make it a longer story, but in a short way.
All
But it
right.
started when I was a little girl. I already felt called to cross-cultural missions, but I didn't know where. But I knew already that it was cross-cultural missions. And when
Mm,
I met my husband in university, he felt called as a teenager, also as pastor, but we didn't know where to go. But it was a 2-year discernment process. But God used a conference back in Brazil, a missions conference,
mm-hmm.
and someone that was speaking that conference. He at the time was leading the university ministry around Europe, IFES, and we
Yes.
said we were willing to go anywhere. And any thoughts? And he just heard our story and say, "Have you ever considered Italy?" And we were
Mm,
caught a little bit by surprise, like, "Why is that?" And he shared more about just the need that they had for both student ministry and for church, and that was attractive to both my husband and I. For he had a desire to plant a church in a city, and
mm-hmm.
I had been wanting to work with student ministry. So it was a 2-year journey, but what we're grateful is that God gave peace to both of us. It wasn't something just in
Mm,
his heart or my heart, and it
yeah.
was truly for both of us. And we never looked back, to be honest. We had, of course, hard times and good times, but we never looked back at the place that he has called us. And we've been here 11 years, so we're grateful.
11 years. That's a long time to do cross-cultural ministry in a different country, a different
Mhm.
place. Yeah, if you look back on the beginning of your journey and where you're at now, what are some of the things that you've learned uh, living in a foreign place, starting something new? Um,
Yes.
what have you learned?
Yeah, we've learned, I think we heard it before coming, but I think as we arrived, that made a significant difference to try to arrive as prepared as we could, you
Mm-hmm.
know. We tried. Portuguese is not so far from Italian,
Yes.
so we tried our best to just do some language learning before, and I think that helped. When we arrived here, we could connect. It was still intermediate level, but we could connect
Mm,
directly with Italians.
yeah.
So I think that not only in the beginning of our ministry, but throughout the years, made a difference of just how we created relationship, and didn't and had to go directly with Italians. And um, we ran a little bit out of the tried to be away of the missionary bubble
Yeah.
with both Brazilians and Americans and others. And I think that paid off. So that was a lesson that I think it was helpful for us. But then we know this, but when experience, it's different. The power of prayer,
Mm,
we were praying. We wanted to start a team. We wanted. I mean, our desire was that maybe God would give us an Italian team
yeah.
here, and we had been praying specifically for an Italian worship leader, because
Mm-hmm.
my husband and I, people do not want to hear us sing or lead worship. So we prayed so much that God would give us an Italian worship leader, and God gave us. So it was great to see that answer to prayer and to form team and do life alongside people that have been our friends, that we've done life together. But
Yeah.
so yeah, power of prayer. These are just two that comes to my mind. Yeah.
Mm. So what's as the importance of prayer at the beginning that you've learned, I'm sure that as you've been going deeper in prayer, have you seen what have you seen God do uh, through prayer in your
Mhm.
ministry? What is the importance of prayer?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one thing that we saw him answer powerfully as well. Our desire was mostly Italians that might have been seeking God and
Mm-hmm.
had a hunger for Him. We didn't want to plow with people that were not interested at all to talk about God. But you never know who you're going to meet, and we were like, God, would you make space and open doors for us to meet people who are actually hungry for you, that we have an opportunity to share the gospel. And I'll share one of the stories that answered many of the prayer of people that were hungry for him. But one of the it was this student. Her name is Flavia. She studied medicine,
Mm-hmm.
and in every semester we started what we call Seekers Bible Studies. Basically, a
Yeah.
Bible study, but most of the people will be, seekers, people that were not exposed to faith in any way, and this was our desire. But every time we start, it's always like this roller coaster of like, we're starting this, and everybody in our group and church is praying like, oh, we're starting this, and we're announcing, but we don't have anyone that has signed up to it. We just do this step of faith, and like, okay, in 1 month we started, and everybody start praying. And we saw God being faithful every time to when we took that step of faith to bring people
Yeah.
to this journey of faith. And specifically that for Flavia, it was powerful because that was maybe the fifth group that we had. And again, every time was a roller coaster. And it was 2 days before we start the group. And I was in a place and say, God, maybe this will be the one time that maybe, you haven't sent anyone. And I was
Mm-hmm.
in that place. And we were going to give a very last announcement on a Sunday to say, hey guys, we're starting this group on Tuesday. Anyone who's interested will come in. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'll give this next announcement saying it's just we're starting. When we finished the service, I see this girl, and it was my first time seeing her. So I say, hey, what's your name? And started talking with her, and she says it's Flavia, and she starts sharing her story.
Mm-hmm.
She says it was absolutely her first time in the church, and she starts sharing her story. She says, I don't know what is this group about, or I don't know anything. All I know is that I think God is I think I need to be part of this group. And we were like, wow, what did go from just being part of this group? She shared her story that in the last months she had been going through something very difficult with her parents, just struggling in the
Mm-hmm.
marriage and just being in a very dark place. And she found a song in the internet that God really used to speak to her heart, and she was holding on to that song.
Mm-hmm.
And in that journey, she finds a church in on internet. And she said that very Sunday when she entered in the church, the worship team was practicing that song when she entered in that
Mm-hmm.
place.
Yeah,
So
that's
she was
good.
just started. She got emotional, and she God used that to say, this is the place for you, and this is the journey I have for you. And it was so beautiful to see her journey, and in not only God answering our prayer that she would come. She
Yeah.
took part of the group, but moved powerful in her life. She got to know Jesus, and just seeing her journey of being baptized. And today she's one of the leaders of small groups in our church. But you just see that faithfulness of God. He's really like that shepherd that goes after the one, that leaves the 99 to go after the one.
Yeah.
And we saw with Flavia, we saw with others of just God honoring that place of desire of like, bring people who are hungry for you. He really does answer those prayers.
Yeah, he really goes after the people that are hungry, that are seeking him, and he draws people to himself so that we're finding those people that we could work with. You're working in a lot of evangelistic work. What is evangelism? What does that look like? I think that word is scary for a lot of people because
Yeah.
they don't really know what it means. A lot of people think it's just about standing on a street corner with a sign.
Mhm.
It's a lot more relational than that.
Mhm.
What is it for you? What is evangelism, and how do you help find the people that God is drawing?
Yeah, absolutely. I resonate with what you said, that it's in our experience have been so relational, just getting to know. I think one of the things that maybe in Europe, in other places as well, but maybe even more so, the trust and journey with others. Why people would trust to go on a faith journey with others is at that friendship level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And getting to that place. So yeah, how you had a good question of how do we even find these people. We remember arriving here in Rome. We had a newborn, a 2 month baby, and then we just knew anyone. It's like, God, where do we even start of getting to know people who are hungry for you? And we looked around our community and we thought, let's start with relationships wherever. Let's try to see any current communities that are already here in any group, in any social activities or something. Try to get into those communities, and in that pray that maybe in some existing communities there will be people that will be open to hear about Jesus. And this was a funny story because as we walk around our neighborhood, we saw that there was a place that they were doing dancing classes.
Yeah.
And here's the background. I'm Brazilian. I love dancing. I think it's so much fun. My husband absolutely hates it, So for years I've been with him, and say, oh, should be so much fun to take a salsa class or something. And he was like, his exact words were, over my dead body. That's what he would answer. Like, okay, but then we look around and then we saw this salsa class, and I just came to him and said, maybe it's salsa class. It could be something, it's a fun community. You never know, etc. and so on. And he reflected, and he paused. And I remember him saying, the things we do for the sake of the gospel. So he said yes, and he was a trooper. And every Thursday night for 2 years, we would go and have salsa classes together.
Fun, yeah.
And really, and I was having fun. He was mostly doing for people, but I think he ended up meeting people. But just seeing that in that group, as we were just making friendship with others and doing the salsa class and hanging out with them outside the classes. We opened, God, is there anyone here that is open? And God was faithful in the process of years. There was a guy named Gabriele. Many of the people were not. Many of the people actually visited our church that when we started and ended up not staying, etc. But Gabriele was open, and ended up in a journey getting to know Jesus and being baptized as well. So we were just grateful for God honoring that desire of wherever we step, he has people that he's after. So these are some thoughts about how relational and friendship and community became are foundational for us.
To find existing communities, I think is really important. I heard it said once that there are thousands and millions of churches around the world. They just don't know Jesus yet. So they just need to be introduced to Jesus. So there's already communities that have been formed, that people are bonded together. Now they need to be introduced to Jesus, and there could be a true community, and a faith community can be birthed out of something that already exists. I think that's really, really a cool process to go through, and just look for those places where people are already forming community and get in and say, the gospel can actually flow through them. As I was praying this morning, God told me to ask you about babies. And I think it's actually about two different topics. One is your own babies as you've walked through. And then two is as you've walked with baby believers, what does that look like? And so what does it look like to actually, let's go with your own personal life and your personal family. What is it like having babies on the mission fields and raising them in a way where you're pointing them to Jesus and showing them what true faith community looks like as a third culture kid?
Yeah. I think at that time we were just so excited and we waited our whole lives to go. They were like, yes, let's, after all of the education, was like, let's go. And we have a 2 month, but it would be great. We were naive as well. Maybe now that 11 years, now we can see some things a little bit of a distance. But that said, it looked like any parents, it's messy with newborns and juggling all these things. So not a perfect way in any sense. So in the first years are exhausting, as any parents would know, with the whole sleeping, etc. and so on. But I think in it, something I always tell my boys that we are our last name is Bruel, so we call ourselves our Team Bruel. You know,
Yep.
we are Team Bruel, and we all of four of us are. You know, we are a team, and whatever God does to any of us is the team thing.
Yeah.
So even yesterday, we had a special service for our church in the lake, and people were sharing testimonies that came to faith, etc. So when we were coming back in the car, I was telling our boys, weren't you guys excited? No, you know, like they team guy used some of the things for Team Brew in specifically a group that it's on Wednesday. It's called the Same Seekers Bible Study.
Yeah.
The boys, for that Wednesday, they have to go to bed earlier. We don't have dinner together. They have, you know, we bring food in their place so we can be the thing. So, so they're saying, oh, and he were like, are we really Team Brew? And so it's like, yeah, you guys have, you know, sacrificed and being there for us. This celebration is all four of us together in family.
Yeah.
And I think for us that like they know deep within why we came here, why we're here as a family, and anything that God does that we can, you know, rejoice together and praise God together. They are part of it, just as we are, you know.
Yep.
Or times Renee has to travel, or I have to travel, and we, you know, kind of help each other out and things. They are sacrificing as well. So this idea that the family is on mission together, you know, and they have ownership of our church and ministries that God entrusts to us. So I think that was something that we tried in imperfect ways, but I think they got it as much as they could do of being part of it together, you know. And for new believers, yes, this is something. Yes, obviously with the body, everybody has their part to play in the body, you know. In the part that one of the things that I love the most is walking for that part of the journey of people that are seeking God into they came to a place of a invitation to respond if they want to follow Jesus. You know, that part is the part that I love the most. So it's been great also to like really function as a body and have people's gifts of also with that, because once they have come to a decision, it is that delicate as like the newborns require, you know, more attention and things. It's the same thing with new believers, you know, that are just fresh in this and excited, but also with trying out new things. So it's been a balance of learning how to walk in the first steps, but also counting on people in the body that will walk with them in discipleship and maturing, etc., and so on. So it's been good to work with others in the team that God has raised here in Rome. That we have people that are great at inviting and doing these free things. You know, maybe that's the part that I feel like a privilege and a joy for me to walk in that, and then also have others that are maturing with them, but to function as a body and into having that walking alongside them throughout.
Yeah. So what's the balance of releasing baby believers into playing their part within the body at the beginning, like right away, and walking with them on a journey towards maturity together? What's that balance that you play?
Great question. I think, you know, I don't know originally where it comes from, but it made a lot of sense in our community. The concept of belonging before of believing, you know, for us, that made so much sense to us, instead of like, you have to, you know, have these decisions and behave in a certain way before you're part of the community. Everybody that comes in the church or the community, they are first belonging to that specific community. And we learned through the years, what does that mean? Because there are things that people can serve in the church, even serving the church, without even necessarily having the step of like, know for sure if they are believers, you know. They can help, I don't know, a PowerPoint or edit something, or like small things, but it makes it feel that everybody's building something together, you know. And it gives that sense of ownership and dignity, that this is a body that they are part through. Obviously, in positions of, you know, leadership in the church or in the community, there are different also maturity levels for different positions, for people that are small group leaders and preaching, and others, obviously people that need to have a mature walk with God. So we can't just, you know, we walk with them and through the different things. But I think in general, at least the experience that we had here, churches were too slow to actually invite people to belong.
Mm.
than the mistake of giving too much too soon, and we did
Yeah.
the mistake of also giving much too soon, and we learned along the way, but at least it was worth to like see how they are part of it, and because they sense the community, they sense Jesus in the community before they can fully formulate what it is. And
Mm.
when they're saying yes to the gospel, they see that this is not only a message, they have embodied a message through the community.
Mm.
So yeah, that's some of the things we've been learning.
So, how do you foster this sense of belonging from the
Mhm.
beginning in pre-believers and seekers?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so I think I mean, the pandemic was a bit harder, of course, because there
Yeah.
were less events or things. But through some of the things, to have mixture of either events or community things that they could be a part of it. So like, yeah, through picnic or organizing an evening about something. There are always needs, like Italians. I mean, food is such a big part of the culture,
Yeah.
right? So it could be as small as like, hey, we're putting this together, can you help us out, bringing something to eat, or help us out organizing something. It makes such a difference.
Hmm.
If the person it's just the receiving end, it feels a little bit of like an outsider,
Yeah.
when you just, yeah. But there are always things that they can be involved in and be part of the community. So um yeah. And I think another thing is, during the church service, we try to have different voices through it, like someone giving an welcome, someone doing an announcement, someone doing the offering, etc. It just makes that it's not one or two people doing the whole thing, but they
Right.
see the baton being passed to others, and it is a community experiencing together, and that's more felt,
Yeah.
that they are welcome or not, then yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's good. The food is really important in Italy. What have you learned uh, about the importance of sharing meals together? I
Mhm.
think in the West,
Mhm.
especially in America, a lot of people view a meal as fuel and just
Yeah.
getting by. Like, I'm just going to very quickly get some food in me. What's
Mhm.
the importance of sharing uh, a meal over the long term and not just quickly getting something to eat and moving on?
Yeah, good question. I think we learned this as well, because Brazilians, they maybe something between US and America, in Italy,
Uh
not
huh.
as full, but still, like when we arrived here, yeah, it was so even like for me it was new. So I'll just give a short story. We welcomed students. We were having dinner, and we invited some students to join us.
Yeah.
And I served dinner, did my best. I'm not the greatest cook in the world. I do decent.
Yeah.
And then the students came to me and say, "Hey, how did you cook this chicken?" And I explained my best and say, would you mind if I show you some? And these students, guys, these are early 20s. They brought me to my kitchen and say, "Let me give you some tips." And these guys, they knew like cooking skills to a whole new level. So for me, it was a good humbling, and
Yeah.
having them teach me to cook, and they felt like they are teaching me something. This is how
Yep.
you do it in Italy. This is how much oil you put. That's why, like they were giving this stuff, and I was just soaking in. But for me, it was the importance of like, yeah, of having not only the meal together, but um, having that moment of learning from each other.
Yeah.
And it is incredibly relational. So most of ministries here, um, um, you get in meals deeper conversations, a more um, transforming lives is around the table less than in meetings.
Yeah.
So it's something that we've been learning a lot from this culture, and we started to love it.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's the importance of not just, of spending a long meal together, but I think you mentioned the importance of being dependent on the people that you're serving. It's a mutual relationship, that it's
Yeah.
not just you coming in and saying, here, this is how you should live and change your life, but you're actually dependent on the local people. I think that's so good and vital. You're also, you've been involved in worldwide missions, church movements, areas. What do you think, especially among young people now, where do you think
Mhm.
the missions movement in the world is headed? What gives you hope?
Yeah, I think I'm excited to see more and more missions be global,
Mm-hmm.
and to have teams, even here in Europe, which is traditionally, through the centuries have been a mission sending field,
Right.
like in Brazil, we have received so many, but to have people from Latin America serving here
Mm-hmm.
in Europe, to having the Korean church praying so much for the European church,
Yep.
and having, so that, that seems that the relationship between the global south in the Western world, I think we have done a lot of progress in the last years as a global church.
Yep.
Still a lot ways to go. One of the I think a phrase that stuck with me was an African leader, Femi, highly respected in the Lausanne movement. He said, "You've invited us as the global church to give a seat on the table,
Mm-hmm.
which we are grateful for. And his longing as an African leader is to be invited to the kitchen, which is
Mm.
like, you're in
Yeah.
the table and you're like there, but we want to want to be also in the inner circles where decisions are being made and these
Yep.
things. And so I think that's a challenge that the church is growing to have the church from the majority world also involved in positions of leadership in mission organizations and etc. And is that
Yeah.
mutual partnership,
Yep.
um,
Yeah.
what gives
That's
me
good.
hope? Yeah, yeah. I think what gives me hope. I personally have been praying for 4 years for revival. In this student generation, I know people that
Yeah.
have been praying for way more, and people that. But I call me naive, but I do believe God is not done with Europe yet.
Yeah.
I do believe that the giants that we have here in this continent are not bigger than our God. And I'm believing, for God to breathe afresh in
Mm.
this continent. And the thing about revival, even looking to the histories, is that revivals that happen, like, for example, the revival in Wales in 1904, it touched South Korea on the other side of the world. And we're talking about
Mm.
almost 120 years after,
Yeah.
before our time. And where revival would break, and anywhere the fire of revival would touch the other side of the world in a
Mm.
generation that didn't have internet, didn't have flights or
Yeah. That's
social media,
amazing.
etc. And so on. If revival will break out anywhere in the world, I think it was something that it would go global. So
Yep.
I'm praying that revival will break out anywhere, and that this generation would experience a mighty powerful visitation again. When we see in the book of Judges and in others, the biblical story is always it's not a line that goes up and up and up, but
Right.
it's this curve that goes up, and then when it goes down, God raises people that cry after him
Mm.
in repentance, in humility. He breathes again. He's merciful to breathe again. So it's
Yeah.
one of the reasons I'm hopeful about the European church, that I pray that it will be a spirit of repentance that will be over the
Mm.
church, and that will cry out to God, and He will give a fresh wave in it.
As you've looked at revival, you're yearning for revival. What are some
Mhm.
of the elements that you've seen and found in research that provides a place for revival, or are we just hoping that the Holy Spirit will come? Like, what
Yes.
do we have a role in it?
Oh, great question. Yeah. I've learned a lot of the history also, get some of the things that Tim Keller that he got from Martin Lloyd-Jones. So I'm just stealing the people that stole from others, but I think they were
Yeah.
helpful illustration. So Martin Lloyd-Jones got this, and Tim Keller often says when he's talking about revival, he compares it to Elijah in Mount Carmel.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, God was the only one that could send the fire to
Yeah.
that altar that he put it. It's not something any human can manufacture and send a fire. God is the only one that can send a fire. But that doesn't mean Elijah didn't have a role setting up that altar
Yeah.
and putting the wood and putting things and asking God to do it. So similarly to revival, God is the only one in His sovereignty that can send revival. Nothing can, in any way manufacture or plan revival. But I do believe that we have a role of having a fertile soil for Him to move,
Mm.
and create and
Mm-hmm.
building this altar. And looking through the history of revivals, prayer has obviously been throughout the history of revivals. You don't see revival not coming with extraordinary prayer.
Yeah.
People in a place of deep dependence, prayer, repentance. It's in a place of crying out to God, like, we need you. These are the things that we mess
Mm.
up in
Yep.
longing for you. unity. You see in history of revivals very often either different churches or denominations or groups come together in unity, crying out to God. So it's not a formula, obviously. There's no formula for it. Again, Tim Keller uses the image of like Narnia. You can't get into Narnia in the same way. Yeah. After they have gone to Narnia to the wardrobe, he says they don't get to Narnia again through the wardrobe. They get to Narnia in different ways. So similarly to revival, you can't just repeat what was done in the history and expect, you don't get it in the same way. God is sovereign, is creative, it's in different ways, but there are some elements that you see that is pleasing for God, for him to breathe afresh. And I do think that prayer, repentance, unity, zeal, desire for boldness in sharing the gospel are some of the things that God has used in the past that I think are elements that we can do our best to steward a fertile soil for God to move.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point too, to know that, it's not a formula that we put together and say this is going to happen, but there are different elements that we need to take into account and to implement within our lives. And so there are the principles that we must carry. And I think that's the same in revivals, the same in missions. If you want to see any sort of extraordinary movement to Jesus happen around the world, there's these principles that really carry you through, and it's not just a step-by-step formula. It's messy. It looks different everywhere you go, but really the core elements are the same. But from the outside, it looks different. I think that's really important for us to get and to understand. I think that's really good. Do you see any places in Europe that give you hope for Europe, where you see some unity, extraordinary prayer? You see some of these elements that are happening?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. I think in the last years, probably even people that have been here for decades say that in terms of unity in different movements, being in conservative and charismatic, it has been used the word unprecedented unity. I would agree with that, of people more desiring of coming together to actually collaborate together and build trust and do this. So I have been seeing, I think, in the charismatic world, there was some movements. Awakening Europe, it's something that in the last years they've been putting together even stadiums of people coming to worship and pray for revival and conversions coming out of that. And Europe Shall Be Saved. These are in the Sent they had in the US as well. These are some of the most
Brazil.
In Brazil, but the next one they're having in Norway in next year as well.
Oh, great.
So this is the more in the charismatic world, but even in the organizations that historically have not collaborated together in our for me, it's been a privilege to serve with Revive Europe. That's the main ministry. My husband leads the church that he pastors the church that we do here in Rome, and I serve specifically directing. It's called Revive Europe, that we're seeking revival across the continent. And it was a grace of God that have 30 organizations, mission organizations, coming together in this. So it's not the student ministry. What in the US they are known like InterVarsity, Cru, Navigators, Chi Alpha, all of this. For Europe, it's new that we are working together and that we are collaborating and praying for revival together. So to see this in the Lausanne movement, 24/7 prayer, I think in the last years have been a deeper longing to do in a realization that alone, the challenge in Europe is too big. We have to come together and do it together, especially revival, which is something that only God could do. No conference, no organization, no person, nor ministry, nor denomination can go after this alone. Right. It's something that, but I do see are still small flames, small seeds. But that verse, not despise small beginnings. The small seeds that are there, people going after Jesus. We never know what a fresh wind can bring out of those places.
Yeah, you could definitely see a little ember can bring a big old fire, and be praying for that to happen across Europe. I want to see that. I mean, for me, I also see that as you're looking at revivals that impact halfway around the world, the other side of the world, I mean, with all the immigrants that have
Yeah.
flooded into Europe in the past years, I think, if revival breaks out in Europe, they're already coming to Jesus, but I think that they're going to be able to bring that back into their own countries, and you know, even through some of our work with All Nations in Europe, we're seeing things go back into Central Asia
Mhm.
and the Middle East, and people doing things over WhatsApp and Zoom that their family members are coming to Jesus. There's baptisms
Wow.
that are happening
Wow.
through the computer screen. So
Hmm.
it's pretty amazing that it's already going back. But I think if revival really breaks out, it could really spark the world because
Mhm.
we're such a connected global family at the moment. There could be really something big happen throughout the world, and that's
Amen. Yes, absolutely. And the waves of immigrants also coming that are being used by Jesus to the European church as well. Is
yeah.
that means reality as well? Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen some of that start to revive the European
Mhm.
church, right? And they
Yeah.
start to see new people coming to Jesus. There seems to be some sort of a momentum that they're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, there's something to this Jesus. Let's try
Yeah.
to figure this out. Come back together." I think a lot of times, I think we're starting to see this, right? The U.S. is usually behind Europe a little bit, but we're definitely in this post Christendom world where our old methods of, putting up a sign on the street corner and getting a building will bring people into the doors of a church. It's going to take something totally different than before. And we're seeing the big shaking of like what are people's foundation in a post Christendom world, because they were actually their foundation was religious structure more than it was on the anchor of Jesus himself, and that he could anchor us in the middle of a storm. It's like, oh, we have these structures, religious structures here. I'm anchored to that. And so, as you've been living in a place where uh, really the religious structures haven't been people's anchor in Europe, and then the people with authentic faith and true faith, they have been anchored to Jesus. How do we how do we grab a hold of that anchor in the middle of a yeah of yeah a culture that's not dependent on religious structures anymore?
Yeah, so good, so good. I think it connects to the previous questions that you have any, concerns or place of global missions. I
Yeah.
think for the Western church in general, which I mean, the European church, the North American church, maybe Australians and New Zealand brothers, but the Western church in general, um, because it tends to be a church that it's so good with methodology and so effective and great leadership and things, it's harder to be in that place of dependence and not depending on just the plan and the methods, but
Yeah.
being truly depending on Jesus. And I think that's something that it would be amazing to see how God will break out the schemes that um, sometimes he brings revival on the outskirts. It
Mm.
could be the migrants or the others, and see God just does
Yep.
his thing. He surprises. He used
Yeah.
the wild things. So I think yeah, again, this place of not relying. On our methods and plans, and there's space for that, of course. It's not that
Hmm.
we have to be good stewards, but it's not, as you say, it's not the anchor. It's the anchor of that walking with Jesus, listening to his voice, obeying. There's no shortcut of that
Yeah.
relationship with the Holy Spirit, and depending on Jesus every step of the way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important to be anchored and have a true anchored faith. Traveling the world, sometimes not in COVID. Your husband is traveling. You both are pretty successful in different ministries. How have you found both a husband and wife be successful in their own right? How have you found working together, and the mutuality that you have for one another, respect that you have for one another? How has that been? And what's that interplay like between husband and wife in
So
ministry?
such a good question. Yeah. I think one of the things that I heard when before we got married, in those marriage counseling courses, but it stayed with me, that some couples, 1 plus 1 doesn't equals less than two. The
Mm.
two put together, they are less,
Mm-hmm.
they're weaker than each individually.
Hmm.
And some couples, 1 plus 1 equals more than two.
Yeah.
It's more than just those two individuals doing that. And I think that stay with us because, as the first years of here in Italy for us, it was a bit easier to nurture that place because we were both in very similar callings here. He was being calling the church, and I had with the ministry. Both of the ministries were feeding a lot of each other and had a lot of synergy to it. So we
Yeah.
felt even more so as team partners in ministry as well. It is something that as it progressed more, that we're still ministry partners obviously together, but with recent callings of me being more involved with Revive in the church, I think it's a journey that we have been together of like being for each other, and not giving any space for the slightest kind of either competition between the
Yeah.
two of us, but
Mm-hmm.
just encouraging, which I think it's been something that God has protected in us, obviously
Mm.
with challenges and things, but when Renee's striving, I just get really happy, when I see
Yeah.
him, doing, and I feel very much him for me. He's I couldn't be more grateful for a husband that when is not, I don't know, intimidated if for any gifting or things, but he's for me, and I think that created a foundation with us. It is something that we try to steward our very best, to have healthy like a Sabbath as a
Yeah.
family and rest, because it does get intense with both the local and some regional ministry. But in that journey, we're just relieved that God has been protecting and making us as a team, because we feel that the two of us are stronger when we are together. It's more than 1 plus 1. We are stronger when we stand together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I think you just mentioned one rhythm of Sabbath and of rest and the importance of those spiritual disciplines and rhythms in our lives. What's been the importance of mentorship for you in your life?
Yes.
Both receiving mentorship and giving mentorship.
Yes. It's so interesting that you asked that, because your wife has played a crucial role. Your wife, just for the background, we're part of a group that, oh my goodness, it will be 14 years maybe that we started this
Wow.
goal.
Yeah.
So yeah. But we do meet every year. Obviously, in COVID, we met online, but we do meet every year in person, instead
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 days together. And it's a peer mentoring group out of Leighton Fort Ministries. But for me, it became for us. So it's just women, involved in leadership in different ways. But the thing that is so precious about it, it's a safe place that people that can know the very best and the very worst of me. I can be
Yeah.
completely vulnerable, and they know what to call me out, and they know what to encourage me, etc. And have that people that truly know you
Yep.
and can speak into your life, and they have authority to speak in my life and invited us to speak in each other's life. That iron shapes iron. It's something that for sustainability, at times that group was a lifesaver.
Yeah.
Even last week I went to something hard. Even before my family, I send an audio to that group and say,
Mm.
girls, I need prayer, and we sit by each other. So it's
Yeah.
that family journey together. But mentoring, peer mentoring, and having, I think, in terms of longevity, accountability or something, it has just, there's no way we can do this alone, right? We have
Yep.
to just be with each other and walk alongside each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. I know that uh, my wife Meredith has gotten a lot out of that as well. And through that we have started a couples group as well, peer mentoring group, and it's really a lifeline for us that we get to walk with people and journey with them long term, and it's not just
Yeah.
a short term thing, or hey, we're going to go off for a week and meet some new people, but it's people that journey with you for the long term. It's really
Yeah.
important. It's really good. And you go really deep with people. Um, Now, I have just two questions at the
Yeah.
end that I like to ask. One is, If you could give advice to your 21-year-old self, what would you go back and tell yourself when you're 21?
Mhm. Oh, what a good question. I would say it's going to be even harder than you think, but hang into Jesus into every step, and it's all going to be okay, you
That's good.
know?
That's good.
Yeah.
We often look when we're young and we want to go into ministry or do missions or do something, we often look at the highlights into the future, right? That propels us to go because we see what's possible. And we often don't realize how difficult it really is going to be, but it is worth it. And
Yes.
God uses all the difficult things in our life to grow us and grow the people around us.
Yes.
Good. And anything that you've been reading or watching that you could recommend?
Hmm. Yeah. Uh, I'm about to start. I haven't read it yet, but I'm about to start Prayer Circles. I've been just
Mm-hmm.
exploring different books about prayer.
Yeah.
So I'm just interested in the recommendation of God to actually pray your God-given dreams
Yeah.
be bold to pray these things. So that's my kind of summer exciting book ahead of me that I'm excited to jump into it. Yeah.
All right. Prayer circles. That's good. All
Mhm.
right. Well, Sarah, it was great to talk to you today. So thank you very much.
So good to talk with you, Joshua. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the show today. If you're really enjoying the show, please don't forget to hit the follow button on your favorite podcast app. You could do it right now. Just hit that little plus. And then I would love it if you would leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. So you could go right now to the show and leave a star rating and review and let us know how you are enjoying the show. And find us on Facebook and Instagram. So if you want to connect, interact, I post a lot of quotes and different things that you could actually interact with the episodes and let me know how you are enjoying the show. If you feel inclined to donate, there is a support the show link in the show notes, and it would send you directly to a page where you could donate so that new episodes can be produced for your enjoyment. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have an incredible week.